China, one of the most populated nations in the world, and a place that is always growing and building something that sometimes defies logic in how good they make it.
Okay. How about a friendly contest?
They have the longest bridge in the world that helps connect China to Hong Kong in order to expedite certain transportations. They have many entries on the list of the world's tallest skyscrapers, and this only scratches the surface in terms of what they make. But it's not just what they make, it's how they make it so fast. They are legendary in their ability to construct things much faster than they should be. So allow us to answer the question of how China builds so fast. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Number 7, the hospital. So where does this question stem from? Well, a lot of things, to be honest, as China really is known for doing fast builds. But it was in January of this very year that they made headlines for building something in a time frame no one expected. Mainly, they went and built a fully functional 1,500-room hospital in 5 days. The reason for the hospital was a surge in their number of COVID cases within the country, and they needed to get the hospital up and running in no time flat in order to help handle all the new cases. This isn't the first time they've gone and done light-speed builds for things like this. They're famous for making bridges, railways for their high-speed trains, and more in a fraction of the time it takes other nations to go and build things. But how? How are they able to go and do this in such a short period of time? Well, let's break it down step by step. Number 6, building the future. As in all things, the motivation behind the building is just as important as the building itself. China in recent decades has been dedicated to a singular focus, the evolution of their nation. By that, we mean that they've not so slowly been working on modernizing many of their cities and infrastructure in order to help the major economic boom that they are in. Not only does China have 1.5 billion people within it, it's got one of the best economies in all of the world today, which means that things that need to be built and built quickly in order to help with the expansion of growth. In fact, China has been working hard to do things like make a massive railway system for their trains so that everyone has easy access to the various parts of the nation. They've spent $300 billion on just that alone. Furthermore, they're honestly trying to encourage many of their citizens to go and move on from the smaller regions and towns of their nation and live in the bigger cities where the economic growth can boom even further. They've determined to have a modern and even futuristic nation, and they know that the faster they build, the easier it'll be for them to achieve that goal. Number 5, advanced technology. You might think that it's solely the workforce that helps China build things so fast, and while that is true to an extent, and we'll talk about that soon, a bigger help is the advanced technology that allows them to go and do various things and construct various entities at a much faster pace, such as with the SLJ-900, aka the Iron Monster. This device is instrumental in the building of the railway systems that span the country. You see, when it comes to building railways in China, the terrain all but demands that you raise bridges and then construct the railways onto them, which can take massive cranes, lots of guidance, and some very narrow margin of error. However, with the SLJ-900, the machine merely stands on one finished section of the bridge and then extends to the pillars that will hold the next section. Once it's firmly there, it rolls into the next part of the bridge and then lowers it into place. Then it does it all over again. This allows the bridge to not just be done quicker, but more efficiently, more cost effectively, and without having to worry about bringing in tons of heavy machinery to do the work that one machine can do on its own. An upgraded version of the SLJ-900 is actually working on a massive beast of a bridge via the Maizhou Bridge. Considering that bridge and railways are absolutely vital to getting around China, you can see why they invested in these time-saving machines in order to get the job done faster and get them on to the next project overall. And that's not the only advancement they have made. Number 4, tunneling advances. China is a massive nation in a literal sense, and not all of its areas can be traversed via bridges and even railways. So thus, an easy way to get through certain areas is to do tunneling, also known as boring. But as you might have seen, sometimes these boring machines have to be massive in order to complete a tunnel, and they cost a lot of money to make. But China worked together with some special freelance engineers and were able to go and make some tunneling machines that were smaller, more efficient, and more cost effective. They can drive about 10 meters per day and only cost about $10 million per kilometer, which is actually rather cheap considering that it's $50 million per kilometer in the US. That's a $40 million per kilometer that you can use on other things, including making more kilometers of tunnels. It all adds up if you really think about it. But in truth, the technology is only half the battle. Because while it's true that they do have the bulk of the work for the project, the truth is when it comes right down to it, projects are made or broken by the deals within the government and other parties. Number 3, profit versus need. Let's be honest with ourselves for a second, shall we? When it comes to projects made in many countries in the world, especially ones like the US, the question about construction isn't really that of a need most of the time, but rather of profit. In places like the US, they'll go and do surveys to see whether something like a railway can be built in an area, and then whether it should be built in an area or not based on profit. If the project isn't deemed profitable, they don't need to do it more times than not. In China, things like the railway aren't funded by certain businesses, they're funded by the government, and the notion of profit doesn't factor into things. In fact, many railways in China right now don't even turn a profit. Some of them even lose billions of dollars in terms of money because of how few trains run through a certain area or the maintenance costs that arise because of the elemental damage. Those kinds of things would drive many nations crazy, but for China, they feel a need for those areas to have railways, so that's what they get. Number 2, cutting through red tape. This next one isn't exactly the best thing to talk about because it is rather controversial, but it does need to be said. Mainly in places like the US, there are restrictions about where you can build things and the land you can buy for massive projects due to animal preservation and other facts. But in China, they don't care about that as much. So instead of having to create detours in the path like in the US, China just bulldozes right through. What's more, if China feels that there's a piece of land that can be used to get their infrastructure plans to the next level, they don't have to go and ask permission to get the land. The government just straight up takes over the lease while giving only a certain amount of compensation to the people who once owned the land. Now it is a bit risky because of how China's government works. The people can't openly object and protest like they would be able to in the US. It's not the most popular method out there, but you can't deny it gets results. Number 1, the workforce. Arguably, the most important thing of all is that China has a massive workforce that is able to get work done in ways that others wouldn't even dream of thinking. There was one time when hundreds of workers came together to make a fully operational train station in just a few days, which is truly a magnificent feat. And what's more, the workforce also applies to those who use their minds to go and create machines that can expedite the process of construction even further. Because of the government's clear desire to go and build without issue, these private practices and investors know that if they're willing to do the work in order to figure out how to make things go faster in construction, they're gonna be rewarded by the government, which is a good incentive to create new construction innovation. So what do you think? What do you think of this look at China and how they're able to build things up in days flat, where it would take other nations, including the US, weeks or months to do the same thing? Does this give you a certain amount of appreciation for how China does things when it comes to construction? Do you feel that other nations need to learn from the example that China is giving on this front? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and we will see you next time on the channel.